morning, everyone. So, looking through the practical applications of informed consent, especially during challenging scenarios, and our outline was going to follow this order from the introduction to the conclusion. As already said before, I wonder if you even heard. And then the purpose is to navigate through the informed consent process with practical examples, laying emphasis on challenging scenarios. And at the end of this presentation, we should be able to explore challenges in obtaining informed consent. We'll learn how to obtain informed consent during using the step-by-step guide, and we should be able to effectively follow the informed consent process, especially in challenging scenarios. Now, what is informed consent? It is the process of understanding and agreeing to a medical procedure or research study voluntarily with adequate knowledge of its risks and benefits and alternatives. Also, it is a process in which a person voluntarily agrees to participate in a research activity or research after being informed of all potential risks, benefits, and alternatives. So if we look at this very well, we're going to see that the two definitions are emphasizing on understanding, agreement, and voluntary participation, being informed and being knowing all the potential risks and benefits and all the alternatives that involves the research study, which we're going to tell the participants or the volunteers. So, looking through the background of informed consent, how did it come into play? Now, we said we're not going to be talking a lot about all of this because Gabriel has already told us elaborately on the presentations that he did earlier. So the Nuremberg Code that was established after World War II as a response to the unethical medical experiments conducted by the Nazi doctors outlined principles as follows. Voluntary participation. So the consent of the human subject should be voluntary. The risk of the study should never exceed the benefits. All studies should be conducted by qualified persons. Participants can quit the study at any time of the study, and the study can be terminated if it results to injury, disability, or death of participants. The Declaration of Helsinki also outlines these principles, the right to make informed choices initially and during the study. So it's not supposed to be just at the beginning of the study, but throughout the study, since it is a continuous process. The need for a legally authorized representative for incapacitated participants, the vulnerable population. Who are these vulnerable populations? We have people like children, pregnant women, the homeless, prisoners, and so on. Anybody who is vulnerable is supposed to have a legally authorized representative to consent for them. And we should always put participants' welfare first. So it also encouraged that participants' welfare must take precedence over the interest of science and society, while ethical considerations take precedence over laws and regulations. We also have the Belmont Report, which was also one of the bodies that establish the informed consent process. So they outlines respect for persons, so there should be right to free autonomy, beneficence, the participants' welfare should be the researcher's goal, and justice, there should be fairness and equity in the distribution of burdens and benefits of the study. Now let's look at the 5 pillars of informed consent. Disclosure. Disclosure of information. We need to provide clear and complete study details to the participants. Comprehension. We should ensure participants fully understand the information that we are providing them. Voluntariness. Consent must be free of pressure, no coercion, no undue influence. Competence. Only legally capable individuals or their representatives may consent. And these legally capable individuals should have a sound mental capacity, or their legal representatives must have the same capacity before they provide consent. And yeah. So informed consent is not just a form, it is a process rooted in respect, clarity, and choice. So let's look at the step-by-step process for informed consent process. The first step we're going to see will be preparation for the consent process. What are those things that you need to put in place before you ever start conducting the informed consent process? The initial engagement with the participants, providing information, documenting consent, ongoing consent process, what is it all about, and then the reporting and documentation of it. So the very first one, preparation for the consent process, we have to understand the study protocol. Therefore, we need to review the study's objectives, the risks, benefits, and procedures as outlined in the research protocol. We need to also make sure to pay special attention to the ethical considerations embedded in the protocol as these are critical to ensuring participant safety and maintaining compliance with regulatory standards. So you have to familiarize yourself with the approved consent forms. Is it in English, French, or whatever language? You have to know that language so that communication will be fluent. There should also be training and tools. For us at the CRENC IeDEA here in Cameroon, we attend mandatory training on informed consent procedures, including completing GCP courses. And it is also advised that every other study can also consider taking all of these steps, because alongside their related study specific trainings, they are good so that you can know what exactly is expected of you and what you should be expecting from the participants. We should also prepare all required material, including consent form, participant information sheets, fingerprint inks, and visual aids. You don't want the case where you have a participant in front of you before you start preparing all of those things. Even the participant is going to say, oh, you do not even know what you're doing. So you have to also set up the consent environment. You choose a quiet, private location to ensure confidentiality, arrange seating to facilitate clear communication and comfort. You do not want that scenario where you're going to have the patient sit at the rear end of the hall or of the room where you're conducting informed consent, and you're also at the other rear and you're going to be shouting. So you have to be talking face to face, and you should always remember to put on a very nice and soft smile. Step two is about initial engagement with the participants. What do? You introduce yourself and the study. You clearly state your name, role, and purpose for engaging with the participants. So you can do something like this. I'm Ngwa Clenise, and I am a research assistant for the IDEA study, and this is how we're going to be going about this. So you provide an overview of the research study, ensuring initial comprehension. There should be initial comprehension. The participant should first of all know what you are going to be talking about before you can continue. You confirm participants' eligibility, verify inclusion and exclusion criteria as outlined in the study protocol, ensure the participant is of legal age or obtain a legal representative if it is required. The next thing you should do is to assess literacy and language needs. Determine the participant's preferred language and literacy level. Offer verbal explanations or visual aids for participants with limited literacy. Step three is about providing information. You explain the study's details, purpose and objectives of the study, procedures involved, including duration and expected participants' activities, potential risk, discomfort, benefits, confidential measures for data and biological samples, participants' rights, including the right to withdraw at any time of the study. So you also answer questions, allow ample time for the participants to ask questions, use simple non-technical language to clarify doubts if they are available, and then you verify understanding. You use the teach back methods, address any misconceptions or gaps in the understanding of the patient. You may want to do something like you can ask participants to summarize key points like what will you do if you decide to stop participating in this study? Do you have any penalties at all? To also understand what they have understood. In your own words, can you tell me what the study involves? With all of these questions, you ask them to teach you back what you've already told them. And from there, you can always see if there are any gaps so that you can address all of them in order to ensure understanding. Now, documenting the consents, you have to provide the consent form for review and signing. You ensure the participant signs and dates the form. Use a thumbprint and involve an independent witness where it is applicable. Legal representative consent. For minors and incapacitated adults, obtain consents from legal representatives. Ensure the minor's assent is documented where it is applicable. You provide copies. Give the participants a signed copy of the consent form. Retain the original copy for study records, which is very important. So at every step of it, you have to know that the informed consent process is an ongoing process. It never stops until the study comes to an end even. And even after the study comes to an end, there are also ways that the informed consent still applies. So you monitor for participants' well-being, continue to assess for signs of distress during study participation. For example, changes in body language or verbal expression of discomfort. You provide support or referrals as need may be. You update participants. Always inform participants of any significant changes to the study that may affect their decision to continue. You obtain re-consent if it is required. For example, in the course of the study, you may discover that the informed consent form is no longer inside the files of the participants. So you have to re-consent them following the various steps that you have to follow, putting in place everything that needs to be put in place, then you continue. You maintain accurate records, document all consent interactions in the participant's file, include details such as date, time, location, and names of involved staff. Audit trial, ensure that consent form and all related documents are stored securely. Maybe it could be for years in a locked filing cabinet with restricted access for physical forms and protected encrypted digital storage for electronic forms. What we do here in the IDEA project is after the forms here, they are in a filing cabinet and they are locked. And then access is only granted to those who are involved in the study. Also for our tablets, like the electronic devices that we use in collecting data, they are also encrypted in passwords that only those who are involved in the study can access those tablets. So you can also make the participants to understand all of these things that you have put in place so that they will be able to understand very well how the information is going to be managed and kept private. Let's look at the components of the informed consent process, adopting it from the Cameroon IDEA study. Invitation and study title. So what do we do here? We invite the participant into the study, and then these steps help participants to feel welcomed and establishes trust. For example, we are inviting you to join a study that looks at how treatment and care for people living with HIV are working. You also tell them the purpose of the study. You can say something like you explain the purpose of the study by stating the objectives and its importance, making participants feel that their involvement contributes to something meaningful. Confidentiality and privacy, like we've already said, you make sure to inform participants of how their personal data will be stored. For observational studies like the Cameroon IDEA study, the data confidentiality and privacy involves explaining data security practices, which is about coding of personal information like participants' names and to with password protected and encrypted data collection tools and study devices, known only to research team and locked filing cabinets or physical forms. For instance, your personal identifiable information actually will be coded and only research team members can have access to it. We have also signed a confidentiality agreement that requires us to keep private all information you provide or the ones we see in your medical records. This already tells the participant that they are safe where they are. The study procedures. In clear detail, state participants' responsibilities in the study if they agree to join, stating the type of study and highlighting the requirements such as interviews or medical records and reviews. For example, we will use your information already in your medical records and may ask you some questions about your health during regular clinic visits. If you agree to join, there will be no extra medical procedures done outside what is normally done during your clinic days. Make them to understand all of this. Also state that it is voluntary, right? There's voluntary participation, so there's no force in asking them to participate. Also state the duration of the study. Provide clear information on the time commitment required for participation, tailoring this explanation to the specific study. For instance, the study will follow or monitor your health for 2, 3, 4, or 5 years, with each session taking about 30 minutes and will happen during your regular clinic visits. In the case of the IDEA study for pediatrics, inform them that we will not require their presence since we will be following their health from the documented information in their medical files. Now, the potential risk, make sure to tell them about the potential risk also. In this component, you are discussing the potential risk and how they will be managed by providing specific examples to reassure participants that steps have been taken to minimize risk. For instance, this study has very low risk, like some questions may make you feel uncomfortable. If that happens, you can skip the question or you can stop the interview. This makes them have control over their information and builds trust. Compensation, compensation and reimbursements. Make sure to be transparent about the compensation and reimbursement status of your study. For example, there is no payment for participating in this study. However, If you have to travel for a study visit, we can cover your transport costs. Yeah, this also tells them if there is anything, they shouldn't be expecting something at the end of it when there will be nothing at all. You also make sure to state the benefits of the study, state both personal and societal benefits. Meanwhile, direct benefits may not apply. You emphasize the broader impact of their participation. For example, though you might not see immediate benefits, the information that we collect could help improve HIV care for others in the future. Contacts for questions. Provide participants with contact details for the research team and ethics committee, making sure that they know how to raise concerns or ask questions. You can talk to the study coordinator or the study lead on the numbers provided in the information form. For instance, for the IDEA study, we have Dr. Peter Ebasone and Professor Zudi, respectively. And the last but not the least component is filling, filling and signing the process of review and signing the informed consent form. Adapt your approach based on the literacy levels of participants. Make sure to always do that because all participants are not the same and the study requirements also. For example, nothing is new on this form. When you're already providing the form, you've already informed them. Now you're providing the informed consent form for them to sign. You make them to understand that it is just a repetition of the things that you have discussed with them in the consent for the information sheet. Good. So the process of securing informed consent, how does it go? Like initial information exchange, self-introduction, invitation of the participants into the study, in-depth discussion. We also look at discuss the purpose, procedures, risks and benefits and alternatives. And then if there for treatments, if treatments are available, voluntary agreements, ensure that the consent given by participants is voluntary and it is free from any form of coercion or undue influence. Access for understanding. The researcher or investigator must ensure that the participant has fully understood the information provided, and then you formally document the consent, participant signature, and researchers' full names and signature. And this is a kind of cycle that it goes through, introducing yourself, and then you provide the consent form, read or allow the participant to read, and give enough time for them to read. Allow also time for comprehension, access for participants' understanding and willingness to participate, and then you document the process. Always remember to encourage questions at every step. So after introducing any step, you may want to ask them questions to verify if they have understood the information that you've provided to them. Now let's look at some practical scenarios with examples. So challenges during the informed consent. What are these challenges that you can find? You can find complexity of information. Clinical trial protocols and research procedures can sometimes be technical and complex. So you have to make sure that you explain this to the participants. Language barrier. Participants may speak a different language than that of the researcher or might not even be proficient in the language of the consent form. So you have to make sure that you walk them through all of these. Cultural norms, beliefs, and values can also impact participants' understanding and perceptions of clinical research. Competence of participants also. The participants' capacity or competence to understand the information that have been provided is greatly influenced by factors such as age, level of education, severity, uh, disease severity, or cognitive disability. So there could also be religious influence. Sometimes the decision for participating in research projects is influenced by religious beliefs of the participants. So having a background understanding of the participants' religion can be of great help. There could also be false expectations. So while some participants may fear being treated as mere experimental experiments for the study, others refuse to take part because of historical evidences of clinical trials that they have heard before, like those of the Nazi doctors report that you can have those dilemmas that involved human subjects and there was really no consent. They may just be afraid because of what they heard before. So you have to clear all of this. So providing consent in a way that builds trust can enhance understanding and clear all of these misconceptions. There could also be poor communication techniques by the investigator, so which can lead to patient's anxiety or denial. So if you should be very, very clear with what you're telling the participants, I believe that they are going to understand you very well and are going to comply with the study. Poor understanding and comprehension of consent forms and patients' perceptions. Most patients may see that research will put extra burden on them So you ensure trust and clarity of the information that you provide to them. Let's look at the first case of dementia or stroke. For example, if you want to consent with patients with dementia or stroke or any related one, how can you go about it? Now you have to the first thing, the scenario here is the patient with mild dementia needs surgery. The challenge is limited ability to process information, risk of undue influence from family members. Let me clear this off. Now, the solution is you should assess capacity using standardized cognitive tests, involve legally authorized representatives if needed, use simple language and reinforce key points multiple times, and then you document the informed consent process. As you can see here, you can see this could be the investigator, this could be our patients here, and then the legally authorized representative. So these three people should always, these three people should, somebody is doing something on the screen. So example 2 is on language barrier. The scenario is a non-English speaking patient requires an urgent surgery. Will you leave the patient because they do not understand English? No. You have to first of all identify the challenge, which is miscommunication, inability to understand medical terminology. The solution here is that you use certified medical interpreters to provide this information to them, provide written materials in the patient's language if possible, and then you use visual aids or videos, as you can see on the picture there. And then family pressure or coercion too could be another one. The scenario here is a patient is pressured by family to refuse or accept treatment. The challenge is that the patient may feel unable to decide independently, and there's also ethical concerns about autonomy. So you have to speak to the patient privately to assess true wishes. You reinforce the right to make personal medical decisions, and you use ethics consultations if necessary. As you can see, these are all fingers pointing at her. She does not even know what she's expected of. She does not even know anything. She's confused. So you have to help her by assessing her true wishes and then make her to understand that her consent matters a lot. If she refuses, please do not force her. Just let her be. And we have also emergency situations. Unconscious patients, you may have them, or unstable patients. The scenario is a patient in critical condition needs surgery. The challenge is that there is no time for full disclosure of information, and then the patient is unable to provide consent. So you apply implied consent for life-saving interventions, which is even understood by the law. You seek consent from next of kin or a legally authorized representative if possible. Document all efforts to obtain consent and justify your decisions. The last example is about cultural barriers. As you can already see, there's cultural barrier here. The scenario is this patient from a cultural setting where family elders traditionally make decisions for healthcare is presented with a consent form for a procedure. So the challenge is that the patients might feel uncomfortable, pressured, and not fully understand their rights and options. There is disempowerment to independently consent without their family elders. And then there is misunderstanding of the informed consent. They may not really understand them since it is their elders that have always been doing it for them. So you have to involve family members who can consent or witness the informed consent process, use culturally appropriate language, using consent forms and educational materials, provide culturally sensitive material, and always be very patient with this kind of clients. Be patient and be flexible with them, because if you do not do that, you're going to miss out on a lot. Let's look at some challenges with the IDEA study here with us here. So we have a few challenges and they are outlined as follows. We have some participants do not know or have never heard about research before. In this case, what do? You need these patients to consent also so that the study can continue. So you have to define it in the most simplest terms using day-to-day life examples to explain to them and to tell them how sometimes you may want to find out about something and then the measures that they take in order to find out about that thing that they do not understand, to bring them to the understanding of what it is all about, what research is all about. And then you access for understanding and you obtain assent or consent. There's also level of education and understanding. Try to fit into the participants' level of understanding, access for comprehension and obtain assent or consent. There's another one here with the pediatrics or the children, which is the age of disclosure for children. Normally, from 0 to 9 years here, there is no disclosure going on for HIV. For 10 to 14 years, there's partial disclosure. 15 years and above, there is full disclosure. So sometimes even the children who come here with 15 years, 16 or even 17, some of them may not even understand why they're taking medication because maybe their level of understanding has not come to that level where they have to tell them. that they are on HIV medication. So you have to access for full disclosure by just asking simply when they come and see it, good morning, how are you doing today? Please, can you tell me, do you know why you're taking medication? Some of them may say they take it because their parents say if they do not take it, they'll die. From there, you already know that they do not even understand why they're taking medication. Some of them may say they're taking because they have headache. Why those who know will tell you that I'm taking because I'm HIV positive. So after you've assessed for full disclosure, you assess their level of understanding for the health condition, assess for comprehension of the study, and obtain consent. Sometimes participants ask questions that are not even related to the study, they're not related to the information that is provided to them. So they can ask you questions like, can I ever be cured? Can I be transferred out of this facility? It does not relate to what you were telling them about. So you answer the questions if you can answer, but if you cannot answer, you direct to right quarters, bring them back and consent. There is also language barrier. You assess the literacy level and then you provide explanations in the language of the participants. Here we have English, we have French, we can also have the pidgin language that is widely spoken by most of the participants. So what are the common errors that we make during informed consent? We use acronyms, technical jargon, and overly complicated language. So participants should understand the study purpose, procedures, risks, and benefits in clear, straightforward terms. Like when I was introducing myself, I said I will be doing something on IeDEA. What is IeDEA? I have to define that. What am I risking? We sometimes fail to outline this to the understanding of the participants. So the consent forms should detail both the anticipated benefits of the research and any possible risk, including long-term or indirect effects. Sometimes we state preferences. For example, I would like that you participate in this study. You know, in so many settings, many patients just believe that what the doctor says is right. And when they come and see you in your uniform in a hospital setting, they believe that whatever it is that you're telling them is right. So they do not even have the right to refuse. That is why you have to emphasize on the fact that participation is very voluntary. So do not make them to think that because you can influence them somehow. No, clear that off. So do not state any preference. Once you say that I would like that you participate in this study, most of them have already seen it to be very good and they want to participate, not because they are fully giving in their consent voluntarily, but because they think that not giving it makes you wrong. So there could also be coercion and undue influence, which is really rare. So using force or making tempting offers. So these are some of the common errors that we can have during the informed consent process. So what are some of these possible responses that we can get during the informed consent process? We can get a yes, a no, or an I don't know. If you have a yes, continue with the process and ensure the participant signs the form. If it is a no, you stop the process and thank the participant for their time. If it is an I don't know, we start the process and ensure that the information is presented in clear language, void of acronyms, scientific terms, and jargons. As you can see here, there is a yes here, and there is a no, and there's an I don't know. So what are qualities of a true consent? Consent is not just about verbal communication. Written communication protects both parties. Whether it's medical treatment, surveys, or data collection, ensuring you have consent allows people to feel respected and in control. Consent is about allowing individuals the power to make informed choices rather than being surprised by decisions made on their behalf. You can get into a restaurant and the waiter decides to surprise you with a very nice dish that you've never tasted before. We do not want to surprise our participants with unwanted side effects. Clarity in consent forms builds trust and ensures that people can make fully informed decisions. And also, even in life-threatening situations, obtaining informed consent is crucial to ensure that individuals are aware of what's happening to their bodies. Consent and agreement need to be explicit, informed, and documented to prevent misunderstandings or disputes down the line. A clear written agreement is essential to ensure consent is not just implied but explicit. True consent is voluntary and free from pressure or manipulation. Consent in the digital age needs to be clear, accessible, and honest to foster trust, not embedded in the terms and conditions section. For example, you may want to carry out a survey online and you go and embed the informed consent form inside the terms and conditions section. So most of us can agree that sometimes we do not even go through the terms and conditions, we just agree and we continue. So if the consent form is there, they will not know what they are risking, they will not know what they are benefiting, they will not even know what entails of them in the study. So let's not embed them in them, but let's put them out clearly for everybody to see it. So summarily, Obtaining consent should be conducted in a way that ensures participants are making decisions free from any form of manipulation. It is imperative that researchers formulate that consent process that frees participants from pressure. By following these simple steps, researchers can help ensure that the informed consent process is genuinely effective, transparent, and respectful, and participants' autonomy is well respected. Informed consent should be a continuous process where patients are given opportunity to ask questions and clear any doubts. We have to also ensure effective communication at every step of the informed consent process. We need to build trust and rapport with the participants in order to clear any false expectations, religious impediments, and ensure that they understand the population, you understand the population involved in the research. To conclude, use clear, simple language to convey your information. Confirm understanding with teach back methods. Be patient and allow ample time for questions. Adapt explanations based on literacy and language needs. Clearly explain any compensation or reimbursements. Emphasize the participants' rights, including withdrawal at any time, and document all consent interactions. What are the key points to note? You have to note that failure to obtain valid informed consent can result in legal penalties, including fines or suspension of research activities. You do not want everything that you have done to go in vain. Ethical violations, it can also lead to it, leading to loss of study approvals and institutional sanctions, harm to participants' rights, potentially resulting in litigation or reputational damages. So these are a few assignments for us. We will have to define consent, what informed consent form is, what are the ethical principles involved in the informed consent process, what are the key challenges associated with the informed consent process in clinical research, what are the 5 key aspects that should be addressed during the informed consent process, and should you force or convince anyone to participate in your study, you should be the one to answer that. Here are a few references that we used for the presentation today. And thank you so much.